from others saying that when we conceived and when I had the child, some hormonal shift happened, and that also brought about shift in priorities and shift in what I wanted from my career and how I wanted my career to look like, and so on. And therefore, they took certain decisions in that direction. Now, I really want to understand if it's hormonal or if it's just that life stage where you decide how you want to look at your career. So, did the two of you have any of those moments of saying how do I want to look at my career is different now that I have a child to take care of?
So I don't know if it's hormonal, but yeah, there was definitely a shift. You know, when when you hold your baby for the first time, your world changes. Yeah, that is when you get this feeling that I will do things for her. I will do anything for her.
Mm,
So and and that is something both my parents had prepared me for. And
mm,
they said, because while we talked about financial independence and financial stability, we also spoke about how important it would be to provide for the child.
mm,
Okay, because education is not the only expense. Education and medicals are not the only expense,
correct.
right? So, to that extent, I knew that a career is extremely important.
Mm,
And while you are also torn between spending time at work and spending time with the child, because you know that you're the only parent, you're a single parent, so you don't have a partner who you can rely upon and say, today it's your turn. Okay, every day it's
yeah.
your turn. You're the good cop, you're the bad cop. Yeah, you're everything.
Mm,
So which is why I don't prefer to use single mother. I would prefer to use single parent, because
mm,
um, you're the parent. Okay.
correct.
And so to that extent, I had to really think, how am I going to balance my time uh, between my work and spending time with her? Will she be okay? Will she have questions when she grows up? Okay. And yeah, there were times when I've also wondered, I hope I will be able to financially provide for her for the rest of her life. I mean, as long as it's needed. Emotionally, yes, I knew that I would do things for her.
Mm,
uh, I think the organization that I had worked for then was also supportive to that extent, because her play school, where she went initially, was very close to one of the branch offices. And I requested my boss, I requested my manager if I could work out of there a few days of the
mm,
week, and he was okay with it.
mm,
And of course, like I mentioned before, there was also a creche that I could take her to.
mm,
So to that extent, I did have support, but
mm,
as far as the career is concerned, yes, I had to also ensure, because mom guilt is something that I can never get rid of. As much as parents and therapists talk about it, it's always there at the back of my mind. So I also
mm,
wanted to be in a role where I could provide whatever is needed
mm,
and spend quality time with her.
mm,
And I think I've been able to do a decent job of that.
mm, mm. Okay, we will ask her. she, Mama refused to get me that one toy last time, so
Oh yeah.
that's always a complaint with kids, right? So, uh, how did it change for you, Raji, in terms of how you thought about your career trajectory?
Maybe
Let's say,
no,
in some sense.
probably I sound a bit different here, maybe not, because for me, my mother had always brought us up saying, never quit your job, or quit your job. Quitting your
Hmm.
job should be your decision. So, working
Hmm.
and having a trajectory was, I mean, I never dreamed that I would want to become a head of finance or something like that. I would never started off like that. But uh, I did whatever I did, and I
Hmm.
didn't want to step back. So I kept on moving, but thankfully, I'm working in an organization which gives enough work home balance. If not for that, probably I would have
Hmm.
stepped back. So I had very good
Hmm.
managers who supported this, colleagues who were with me, and also my
Hmm.
parents back at home. So I had I still have,
Hmm.
I continue to have this strong support network, and that is why I'm able to continue to uh, move ahead in my career. But at this stage,
Mm-hmm.
probably now that it's 7 years that she's at home, and I'm also getting into a midlife crisis, probably, that is when I've started to think, now, is this what I want to do? Then I question, get into the space like what Hita was saying, will I be able to financially provide for her? And that is when I continue to do what I'm doing, although I want to do something else. So, yeah, but it's not because uh, of she coming in, but more of my own life stage.
Sure. And I think the question, like you said, it's not because of her coming into your life, but everybody starts looking at their career from with different lenses and saying, can I do something else? And can I do something different with my career, with my, with my life also, and so on. And of course, financial stability continues to remain a big question for all single parents as well, because if in a uh, when it's a couple, you're either one of the two is taking that responsibility, but in this case you are, like Hita said, you're doing both roles. You're being the good cop and being the bad cop. You're doing all of that. um so Hita, this question is directed at you, but Raji, please feel free in case you want to chime in and answer as well. um so, being a single adoptive, and I want to specifically say woman, does that impact your approach to, let's say, romantic relationships? And does that allow you to choose to have um, a romantic relationship in the future, or once the child has come home, and so on? So, how does that change?
Yeah. So I'm really glad you asked me that question. So just like how we view our careers differently, we
Hmm.
want to have a career where we can, at least for me, I can spend enough time with my daughter. So to that extent, I want flexibility. I want my workplace to be closer to home and her school. So it's the same with relationships as well, right? I wasn't relationship averse. Of course, I thought if I can find the right person, then why not? Okay, but in this case, the definition of the right person differs slightly once you're a single adoptive mom. Um, so, I while I had my list of wants, there were also a few additions to it where the person has to love her or parents her the way I parent her, because I wasn't, if I had to take it further, then I also wanted the person to be okay with, not okay with, normalize adoptive parenting. Yeah.
Hmm.
And most importantly, I wanted my daughter to be okay with it, and that was the deal breaker, and it has always been. And next, when you have a child, I also thought it's really important to keep her in the loop for all the communication.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and we were quite open in communicating. Like, for example, when a relationship did not work out, I was very open with her and told her in a way where she could understand and tell her that he wasn't very nice to us, and that's the reason Mama's not friends with him anymore. I also have a partner right now, and it was a long, very well thought through decision. And both of us, my partner and I, knew that my daughter has to be okay with it if we had to take it forward. So he played his part, and while and only when she was fine with the whole thing, she was comfortable with the concept of co-parenting and not being married, right? We decided to take it forward. So it differs, it changes, it drastically changes when you're a single parent and when you're looking at adoptive relationships, because it's a very different chemistry that plays.
Yeah, and I would extend to saying that it can be challenging in different ways, because
Yeah.
you, of course, now it's not just you in the relationship,
Yes,
but there is a child as well who will get impacted by this relationship even more so.
absolutely.
Um, Raji, any thoughts from you, in case you want to chime in or share something? Sure, sure, that's okay. So, thanks, Ida. Thanks for bringing that in, and I think it's also an important perspective, especially. I
Nothing as
mean,
of now, I
we
would say, because I
and I'm
haven't
just
thought through in that line
broadening
at
the
all
horizon. So
for now.
there are single parents, single mothers for different reasons. Either they choose to separate from their partner, or they are adoptive parents.
Hmm.
And in both cases, I think it's important, as they're choosing to have relationships later, how that relationship changes, or how that their expectations changes, and so on. So I do want to ask this question then, therefore, right? You mentioned that a lot of people earlier would come and give you like unsolicited gyan on, how to raise a child and so on. But in terms of raising an adoptive child, and I'm being very specific when I'm asking that. I know raising a child is irrespective, but in terms of raising an adoptive child, have you faced any form of um, challenges from a or any learnings that you've got, let's say, from a societal lens, right? Like how maybe schools or teachers or neighbors, or the immediate environment that you're in perceive. Do they say something different to the child? Do they behave differently with her? Has any of that happened, and how do you deal with anything like that?
Um, but one thing I have learned, Lochin, is you need to build your support system.
Hmm.
Okay, because this is not a decision. This is not that is common. While I would love to normalize this, I want more parents to come forward and adopt children, because it is one of the most beautiful journeys. It's like any kind of parenting journey,
Yeah.
right? But what I have also learned along the way is you need to build your support system, not just with your parents and your family, because that is a support system you will mostly have.
Hmm.
Okay. uh, and like you said, schools and your neighbors. So if
Hmm.
the first thing is, if you want to be in control of the situation, you need to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, so people don't ask. Sometimes there are assumptions in people's minds that, hey, she looks different. Maybe they're adopted, and there are a lot of indirect questions. So you have to go out and be there and talk about it. And which is why when I initially told you, I'm very glad that you're doing this. This is a chance for me to talk about adoption, to normalize it. Okay, so a few things that I did was, of course, when I spoke to my friends, my really close friends and relatives, I also made it a point to talk about it in my neighborhood.
Hmm.
Okay, because there were kids, there were parents, and I
Hmm.
knew that my daughter would be playing with their children.
Yeah.
Yeah, so while I'm kind of an introvert. I'm not a very outgoing person, but I made it a point to go out and talk to parents in the gated community where I lived in, and I told them that I will soon get a baby home, and this is her name. And I so people wanted to know about the process. There were some parents, I think that was very sensitive of them, very sensible also. They came and asked me, listen, what is the kind of conversation you're going to have with her? Because
Hmm.
our kids will ask questions. So, what is the kind of conversation we need to have with our children
Hmm.
about it?
Hmm. Hmm.
Similarly, even in her school,
Hmm.
I was very upfront when I went to schools, and that also helped me decide if the school is going to be inclusive or not. There was one school that said, if she's an adoptive child, please get us her medical records. And I said, I will do that if you're taking medical records from all your
Every kid.
students,
Yeah.
yeah, not just my child. So of course, I didn't go ahead with the school, but there were some schools that were very breezy. They were like, yeah, it's okay, no big deal,
Hmm.
because we've had adoptive kids before, and it's absolutely fine. Should be fine.
Hmm.
So I was very particular and careful when I chose schools for her. And this particular school where she goes to right now, I spoke to all the parents in her class and told them that this is what it is. We are adopted, and this is, and she knows. I have already spoken to her, so in her mind, it is normal, and she might talk about it as a normal thing to your children as well. So these are the kind of conversations, and the response, the way the parents responded was so amazing. They reached out to me and they said, "Okay, so if my daughter says this, what should I tell her? What is the right kind of language to be used?" And the same with her teachers as well. So, in fact, in her class, when they were talking about different kinds of families, they introduced adoptive families as well as another type of family. So, in with all her friends, in her school, in the children's minds, it's normalized now.
Very interesting. Raji, how has your experience been there?
Yeah, very, very similar. I would also agree with Hita that the conversations is what really matters. And I keep having these conversations with people around. First thing is I had this conversation with my daughter, and I told her how different I am with when she compares it with the other parents and friends' parent, and why is it that she does not have a dad, and all of this. So all these conversations that I have, so for her it is very normal. And I, like Hita said, I speak about it whenever I go to school. Their teachers, whoever is taking care of her, they are aware. The principal is aware. So even the local uh, community is aware. So it is important to talk about it. And the more and more I spoke about it, they were all open to it. It was not that there was a hurdle, but they're amazed. They also look at it as something that we've done, something noble, but then they are very supportive.
That actually brings me to this point, and I know when so I mean as I said, Hita was the second person I knew of who was going through this journey. So in my experience, I know whenever I have spoken about you, Hita, and told anybody that you've adopted a daughter, the first response that I've got is how noble of her, and I'm sure both of you have heard this in different ways, in different forms. And in some sense, like Raji, you mentioned, they probably put you up on a pedestal or make you feel like it's the best thing. I mean, it's such an um, selfless thing that you have done and so on. How do you respond to anybody who's, let's say, made a comment like this or says things like this, or comes about and believes or talks about this? What would you like to share with them? Raji, in case you want to share that
My
first.
first response would be there's no nobility in this because I mean, I don't tell this to them, but to be very to give a very blunt answer, I think it's all of our inherent mindset that comes on the way, right? If there are why are there so many couples who want kids, and there is so many people, so many kids who want to be adopted? They don't. There is no match. They don't go and adopt. But then when you look up to somebody who's done this, you say that they are noble. So for me, that's not. So if that is noble, and these are people who really want children, why don't they go ahead and adopt kids? So for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is no, it's not noble. I'm not being selfless. I'm also a human being. It just needs a shift in the mindset. That is what I tell them. And please don't put me on a pedestal because I'm also normal. That would be my immediate answer.
Right. What's been your experience with that?
Well, I cringe. Yeah, it's very cringy when people tell you that, oh my God, you've given someone a life. Yeah, noble is something that I have heard a lot, and you're very brave, you're very strong. I think every mother is strong. And if I'm noble, then biological parents are noble too. I mean, you have a baby because you want to have a baby. You're not doing it to save the world. Or, yeah, you're not doing it to. give someone a life or improve someone's quality of life. Nothing. You're doing it because I did it because I'm sure Raji agrees. We did it because we wanted to be mothers. Simple.
Mm,
Yeah, it's just like, so we don't call biological parents noble, do we? We
mm,
don't say, oh my God, you've given someone a life. Yeah.
mm,
So I wish people would stop saying that. And I particularly remember one of my professors telling me when I had gone to college to talk about adoption, because they had some movement going on about an orphan
mm,
free India, and they had invited
mm,
people to talk. So when I had gone there as a speaker, one of my professors told me, she said, uh, my daughter insists that she wants to adopt too. While I really admire what you have done, I say no to my daughter. So there are parents who say this as well. You've done a great thing, but I don't think I want my child to do that. Yeah, because
mm,
like you said, my gene, uh,
mm.
my good qualities have to.
Yeah, I don't know what those good qualities in
Yeah,
Gene are. Maybe they shouldn't get passed on sometimes.
and not just that, people have called me brave, and when I tried to understand why they felt I was brave, they said, because you don't know where the child is from, right? You don't know who her parents are.
Mm,
She could be born in prison, she could be born to a sex worker. So
mm,
you don't really know who this child is. This
mm,
could be a child who's born out of wedlock, and there are. They assume that the child will inherit some of those traits from the parent. So I said, being a sex worker is not inherited in your genes.
mm,
Being in prison is not inherited. So the first thing I tell them is, it's, and there are times when I have called it out and said, don't say it's a noble thing, because you're excluding me from all the other parents. You're making it look like my child is different. You're making it look like she's got something that she probably did not deserve.
mm,
So while I call that out most of the times, there are times when I let it be, because when I feel that this is a futile conversation. But if anyone's watching this, I just want them to know that never call an adoptive parent noble.
mm.
You know, ask them how your child is. How are you as a parent? Are you stressed out? So, the normal questions that you would ask parents, right? So, ask us those questions.
They're as selfish and as selfless as any other parent,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So, wanting the love of their child at the same time, throwing everything that they can for the child's sake, like both. Absolutely. So, I do want to ask this question. So, how do we, and like you mentioned, right? You also spoke about your professor saying that she wouldn't want her daughter to do this, or some parents coming and saying, we admire what you've done, but we may not want to do this, or we may not want our children to do this. So how do we destigmatize the process, and what is really that stops people from adopting? What happens there? And I can say this, I know of a family friend, a really um like amazing person, and she and her husband both have been wanting to have a child for a very long time, but they have not been able to
Mm,
have one biologically. And her mother-in-law just put her foot down and said, "You're not adopting." They, went with that process. They wanted to adopt. They desperately wanted a child, to a point where now they make peace with spending more time and with other people's children, or in children's homes, or with orphanages, but leaving that desire to want a child and raise a child and be a parent, just because they are not able to have it biologically, and the family is like, no, we don't want to adopt, or you cannot adopt. So what is it that really stops people from that? And second is, how do we go about destigmatizing this?
see, there are quite a few things, Lucian, that play in people's minds. First of all, mm, I also know. I also have a really good friend. They are a couple and who decided to adopt, and it wasn't their last choice. They wanted to do this. They wanted to have become parents by adoption. So when he went to a friend to ask for a reference letter, his friend told him, I know a very good fertility doctor. And he said, I don't have a problem with that. You know, I this is how I want to be a parent. So first of all, people are, and I don't know if it's just in India or other places as well. People are also worried as to how the society is going to view them. Will they think we were incapable of having children in case of couples? I've had friends who have come and told me, listen, I already have a biological child and I want to adopt the second one. How did you go about convincing your parents? And I didn't have any convincing to do. They're worried that the child might not look like us. So there was another friend who told me my in-laws are okay with me adopting as long as the child has a fair complexion because my husband and I are very fair. So we don't want the child to grow up and wonder why they look different from us.
Oh God, okay. They
Okay,
could have a biological child who doesn't have a fair complexion. They don't think about it
exactly.
like
That was
that.
my question to her. Yeah.
Right.
So and when you're adopting, I don't know if it's the right thing to say, but we do have a choice of the child we want to in terms of health status, in terms of gender. I wanted a girl, I wanted a baby girl, and I got a baby girl, right? So you should be. I think it's about asking yourself why you want to adopt, and the other thing that stops people from adopting is, like I told you, the apprehension that someone expressed and said, we don't know who the child is born to. Yeah. And what if it's born in prison and the child grows up becoming a criminal?
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
Uh, some
that discounts all the billionaires, millionaires who, who've swindled money and gone to prison. But okay, well, yeah.
Yeah, so there is trauma. So people always view adoption as a last resort, like you said. After you try, I know someone who's adopted after 5 or 6 failed IVFs. So I can only imagine the pain that she would have gone through. And she always wanted to adopt, but her in-law said, "No, this you try this one more time."
Mm. Mm.
Right? So I think it's mostly the stigma around adoption. So that needs to be destigmatized. And I think people will need to talk more about it. Um, so my mom recently, when we had a conversation, she said, you were not the only one who had a fear, because my brother has a biological daughter, and she loves her to bits. And she said, when you got your daughter home, my only fear was, will I be able to love this child as much as I love my biological granddaughter? And it wasn't any different. They are inseparable. My daughter and my mother are inseparable. So it didn't make any difference to her. See, I wanted to be a mom, so I knew that I knew what I would feel for the child. But for my mom to feel for her the same way she feels for her biological daughter, so I would say that it's not any different, right? And today, I'm also really happy that the adoptive parent community in India is growing. There are more parents. There is a huge number in Bangalore itself. There is a huge community of adoptive parents. So people don't talk about it because some people think it's the privacy of my child needs to be respected, and I don't want to talk about it even. But since I have normalized it for my daughter, I want to talk more about it, and I wish more parents talk about it. That is the only way you destigmatize, and that is the only way people know that this journey is no different from biological parents' journey.
Raji, in your experience, and I know at the start you said you come from a very traditional family, right? And a lot of times we see traditional families being very closed about about this idea. So what, as per you, are some of the reasons why families are not okay with this? Is it just the gene, or or is it something else, or is it, will the child look different from me? What are these thoughts, and what else can we do? Of course, conversations, but is there something else that can also be done to
I think
destigmatize
in my
this?
case, the problem was my mother had a genuine reason. She said, you should have thought about it when you were in your 30s. I think when I got my daughter home, I was 36 or something like that. Yeah, maybe 38. I was 38. So she said, you're getting older, and with your body aging and you getting into a menopause phase, and this child getting into her teenager, it's going to be difficult. So her uh, reason to say no, or even with my father, it was because of the age that I was in. So the life stage that I was in. It was not about genes or about. So that's why I said, although I come from traditional, the thought process was unconventional. But I know many friends and families who have said no because of genes and like what Hita said. In fact, I had a friend whom I was talking to, and she took me to coffee just to say that, what if you get a child who would get these traits of stealing from somebody or doing something wrong? I said, I hear you, but I have taken my decision. So I think apart from the conversations that Hita said, that really helps. The other thing that I would also say is, if my why is strong, I have to stand through it and convince. And in an Indian society, we have to convince a lot of people. For me, it's just my parents, but for I completely understand when they are married couples, they have to convince their in-laws, their parents, and then
Yeah.
comes maybe in some communities an extended family. And even if, and how will I
Yeah.
be viewed in terms of my extended family? How will my cousins look at me? And the question of in-laws putting their foot down, it becomes very difficult because we are stuck in the relationship that is ongoing and the relationship that I want to come in. Yeah, and
Want
now
to
what should I
bring
do?
in. Yeah.
So I think the only thing that I would say is stand your ground and keep telling them why. Because for me also, it was very difficult to convince my father. He would just walk off whenever I brought in this topic. And But I kept on telling why I wanted to do it. I was very insistent. I respected his thought process, but I said, I understand where you're coming from, but I know I will sail through, and I want your support. So I stood my ground. And today, my daughter and my father are good friends. So they do a lot of things with each other. So I think it's just a matter of time that people will get to the groove. So it's important to stand your thought and to say why you're doing what you're doing. And when we do that, and when more and more people do it, it does take a long time, I would say, to destigmatize, but it's a process.
Awesome. I know both of you talked about very strong support system, and I have to, I really have to appreciate and admire that a lot of biological parents don't have this kind of support system, right? So the understanding, the belief that you can do it, the support that they're extending, the physical and the emotional support that the family is extending, and sometimes it's just taken for granted. But I'm glad both of you have that. But when we talk about support system, and Hita, you specifically mentioned about the adoptive parents community
Mm.
and platforms. So, what does this support system look like for adoptive parents? I mean, there could be, for example, I'm just saying, there could be a lady who's choosing to adopt, but maybe doesn't have, uh, maybe has very aging parents, or let's say doesn't have her parents, or doesn't have both parents supporting, and many other factors, right? So, what kind of a support system uh, do adoptive parents need? And maybe is that, and I do want to call that out, is that different from what biological parents need? And of course, if you can also share what are these communities and platforms where they can reach out and get that support, that is also something we would like to share with our listeners
Yeah.
here.
So, Loden, these forums have been like lifelines to me. Okay. And these were the only forums who gave me genuine advice and who made it made my journey look absolutely normal when I was in chaos. Yeah. So right from how to apply.
Mm.
Okay, even if it's not just for adoptive parents, it's also for prospective adoptive parents. So
Mm.
how do I apply? Where do I apply? What are the kind of letters I need? So even formats of those letters, which is the best social service agency to use to come and do your home study, who are the doctors, who are the pediatricians, in right from the support with the process, to emotional support when you need it, or even when your child exhibits certain behavioral concerns, when you talk about it in the group, there is a great support system. So it does have lawyers, it has therapists, sometimes leads of some really good therapists, in terms of school, in terms of how do I apply for my passport, daughter's passport, how do I apply for the child's Aadhaar card. So, whatever you want, any question that you might have gets answered, your life becomes simpler. And there is always someone to talk to. There is always someone who can relate to what you're going through while you're applying, while you're waiting, or even after you get the child,
Mm.
right? So there are forums for single parents, there are forums for couples. A couple of forums that I would like to talk about. There is a very strong big community on Facebook called FOHB, which is for and of heart babies. Now, that's the politically correct term for adopted babies, because when you introduce the concept of adoption, you tell the child that you came from my heart, you did not come from my tummy. So, the group is called For and Of Heart Babies. There is also another very large group called Joy of Adoption, which is for single parents and parents who are couples,
Mm.
and prospective adoptive parents as well. There is a forum for, like I said, for the lack of a better name, it's just called Single Adoptive and Prospective Adoptive Parents. It's a WhatsApp community. So
Mhm.
what these communities, they don't just help you, but they also help your child.
Mm.
Because, see, for example, in my daughter's class, she's the only adopted child. While it's normalized with the friends, with the parents, everyone, she still knows that she is a heart baby and she's the only heart baby in her class. So
Mm.
these communities also have, they meet up in a child friendly place like an animal farm, or
Mm.
um, you know a
Like
park, or
play,
wherever,
yeah.
any play area, where they meet several children. And so I still remember the first time I took my daughter out. She said, "This is also a heart baby. This is also a heart baby."
Mm.
So
Mm.
they know that there is a huge community out there who
Mm.
cheers for you, who supports you, who's there for you when you get stuck legally or emotionally, wherever you get stuck, there is someone to help you out. Okay, and any doubts or apprehensions that I've had, I've laid it bare in front of the community, and there is always an answer or support.
Mm. Mm. That's amazing. And you know that part that you said, right? Like they may have normalized it, you have normalized it for them, but when still I think as a child, our always thing is a sense of belongingness, right? Like as kids we want
Right.
to belong, as adults we want to stand out, in some sense. So they may still carry this thought that, okay, yes, my friends are nice, I like them, they are my friends, we play all of that, but I'm different. There is something different about me. I
Yeah.
am different, is the sense. What is it? They may not feel bad about it, but they get that sense. But like you said, when they meet other heart babies as them, then it just becomes, okay, I'm not the only one. And I think
Hmm.
that's a very big piece that we keep talking about, even on our podcast, saying that the minute you say I'm not the only one and there are more people like me,
Right.
thinking like me, feeling like me, it automatically just takes away the burden off your shoulder of living up to that, or living with that feeling, and with anything, with that positive negative feeling or pressure or any of that sort. Thank you. I'm going to just, and I know we are a little up on time as well. So I'm going to ask uh, two questions, and two questions differently. So the first is the role of colleagues and managers in being adoptive parents? And I know, Raji, you spoke extensively about how your manager really kind of drove this point back with the organization. But um, even for, let's say, your colleagues to be supportive, or for them to reach out or talk about it, and now you said you've enabled the organization to also put an adoptive policy in place. What is really the role of managers and colleagues for single adoptive parents?
I don't think it should be anything different from what they're doing for any other employee. So, like
Okay.
Hita said, inclusion is, and I have not faced exclusion anywhere just because I'm a single adoptive parent. So, the expectation that is set for me is the same that is set for everybody. So, there's no lowering of expectation just because I'm a single adoptive parent. I mean, I'm amazed with other women who come to work with babies and who don't have a support network. So if they don't get a lower, if their bar is raised, so should my bar be. So um, I don't think it should be any different. Policies, of course, need to be, organizations have to work on policies for single adoptive parents, like we spoke about the adoption leave. But otherwise, in terms of
Yeah.
performance or support, it should not be any different from anybody else. That is what I would say.
Awesome. So, as a parent, the support that is extended should be similar. And by that, I also mean to also understand their need, ask them what is the support they need, and kind of extend that support to
Yeah.
them rather than assume. So, we always keep saying ask, don't assume in any form and manner. So, the last question, and I want you both to just share this with um, others who are talking to you. What is um, what is the appropriate response when someone tells you that they are an adoptive parent? So if somebody comes up to you and says they're an adoptive parent, um, what is the right response at that point? And this is, I'm going to use this as a little bit of an educational nugget for people who may have colleagues or neighbors or friends, not necessarily close friends, but acquaintances, neighbors, a parent in their child's school. And so what's the right response?
I would say take pride in it and say thank you. I wouldn't. I mean, I would like to be included, not just call out that I'm an adoptive parent. But while I want to spread this message of adoption is something that people can look up for, uh, I would only leave it at that to say, yes, I am. So
Okay.
Right. I think when you tell them that you're a parent or an adoptive parent, it's the same thing what you would tell a new biological parent, right? Congratulations. Yeah, and happy parenting. So I would expect a normal response. Definitely not things like oh wow how nice. And I think there are some really amusing weird responses I've had when I've told them. In fact, the first time somebody heard about it, they're like, "Does she know?" It's more of a curiosity than an acknowledgement that you're a parent. Okay, so you just remove the word adoptive from there. And how would you respond when someone tells you I'm a parent? And I saw this a lot when I moved to another organization, the second organization from the time my daughter was adopted. And there, people would take turns. When I would take my daughter to office, my colleagues would take turns to engage her while I was working. People would get bean bags. People would take her for walks. And they would do this for any child. So I think normalize it. Yeah. And like I said before, do not put us on a pedestal. Do not give us undue advice. Do not ask curious questions. Okay. And if there is a doubt in your mind, please ask. Because my daughter looks very different. So people ask me, people who don't know that I'm a single mother, They've asked me questions like, "Is your husband very dark?" So I don't mind if people ask me, "Are you an adoptive parent?" I'm very proud of being one, and I don't hide that. I'm proud of my daughter. Yeah, so you can ask me instead of beating around the bush and asking me, does she look like your husband? Does she look like her father?
Hmm.
Yeah, and go easy on the advice,
Hmm.
right? And I think even for biological parent, they also get it by trial and error. We also get it by trial and error. We have made parenting mistakes just like any other parent, just like our parents also made some mistakes with us, right?
Right.
So that keeps happening. So go easy on the advice and no unsolicited help. Nobody likes it, not even biological parents.
Absolutely.
And I would like to part with this one advice that my friend, I think that was the only sensible advice I got. When he knew I was adopting. He was a biological parent, and he was an officer in the Navy, who quit Navy, and then he became my colleague. So he told me once, you will have your moment of joys, you will have a lot of happy moments, but you will also have your moments of frustration, and it's normal for a parent to have it. And if you ever get a thought in your mind where you think, oh my God, why did I get myself into this? Please understand that biological parents also go through that. They get such thoughts, and don't kick yourself. Until date, I think that has been one of the most sensible, useful tip that I have been given. So if you have useful parenting tips to share, please do that. Don't assume that we are going to be bad parents because we are not biological.
Absolutely not. And and I think I had to fight some people in some sense, some sessions, and tell them that every mother is a good mother. When she genuinely cares for her child, she's a good mother. Her parenting style may be different from yours. What she prioritizes may be different from yours, but that doesn't make her a bad mother. So, absolutely. Thank you so much, both of you, for being candid, for being honest, for sharing your journey so openly. And I'm glad that we could do this topic. This has been something which I really, really wanted to cover on Career Uninterrupted. So, whether you are choosing to have a child, whether through biologically or as an adoptive parent, the intention is that how do you enable yourself to be better parents, and how do you continue to have uninterrupted careers. So thank you both of you for this conversation, for being here. And I'm sure we would have provided the right education and information to parents who are contemplating adopting. So, thank you so much for that, and lovely having both of you here.
Thank you, Lochin. Lovely talking to you too.